preserve our independence, we must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our choice between economy and liberty or profusion and servitude. I place economy among the first and most important of republican virtues, and public debt is the greatest of the dangers to be feared. It is incumbent on every generation to pay its own debts as it goes. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the very continent their fathers conquered.
There's a chart I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution, and 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution. Shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are. Teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own, because he won't fit on my chart. 1% of America has 40% of all the nation's wealth. The bottom 80%, 8 out of every 10 people, or 80 out of these 100, only has 7% between them. And this has only gotten worse in the last 20 to 30 years. While the richest 1% take home almost a quarter of the national income today, in 1976 they took home only 9%, meaning their share of income has nearly tripled in the last 30 years. The top 1% own half the country's stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. The bottom 50% of Americans own only 0.5% of these investments, which means they aren't investing. They're just scraping by. I'm sure many of these wealthy people have worked very hard for their money. But do you really believe that the CEO is working 380 times harder than his average employee? Not his lowest paid employee, not the janitor, but the average earner in his company. The average worker needs to work more than a month to earn what the CEO makes in 1 hour. We certainly don't have to go all the way to socialism to find something that is fair for hardworking Americans. We don't even have to achieve what most of us consider might be ideal. All we need to do is wake up and realize that the reality in this country is not at all what we think it is.
Every human on this planet is enslaved, whether they know it or not. This is not the crude and primitive slavery of ancient times. It does not rely on whips and shackles to keep the oppressed in their place. These tools have been rendered obsolete by much more sophisticated methods. That most of the enslaved are unaware of their condition and would in fact argue fiercely that they are free is a testament to the effectiveness of these invisible chains. You've heard the expression, money makes the world go round. There's truth in that. Money is the prime motive for human labor in modern civilization. If you want food, shelter, and clothing, you must have money. And unless you're part of that tiny minority that has more money than they could ever spend in their lifetime, then you must work, beg, or steal for that money. That's why you get up in the morning and go to work, even if you hate your job. And that's why the specter of unemployment is more terrifying for most people than the prospect of spending 50 years of their life performing menial tasks within the confines of a fluorescent-lit cubicle. Of course, in Western countries, some are fortunate enough to have pulled away from the brink and do not live in fear that their basic needs will be met, at least for now. And yet they keep spinning the hamster wheel. Why is that? Could it be because money and the bling that it buys have become symbols of status and prestige? Money offers an illusory form of social validation, but even those who are not caught up in distinguishing themselves by how much they accumulate still must acknowledge the social stigma that comes with poverty. The combination of these primal motivators, the need for food, shelter, clothing, and social validation, is a very powerful force. It's enough to drive humans to engage in all forms of activity, even to the point of harming themselves or others in the process. The accumulation of money is therefore an accumulation of social and psychological power, and those who control the creation of money control this power at its source. So who controls the creation of money? Well, in the case of the US dollar, it's not the government. This shouldn't be an earth-shattering revelation. The fact that the Federal Reserve is a private institution owned by a cartel of the world's most powerful banks is quickly becoming common knowledge. Even the mainstream media doesn't deny it at this point. However, the full extent of what this means is only clear when you understand how the banking system really works. And unfortunately, this isn't something we're taught in school. Once you have it explained to you in simple terms, you'll understand why. Every dollar in circulation is loaned into existence by a bank. The process begins with the Federal Reserve when they loan out money to the U.S. government and to other entities. You've probably heard this talked about before, especially in regards to the interest rate on those loans, which the Federal Reserve raises and lowers depending on economic conditions. But what's never talked about in the mainstream is the fact that the Fed isn't actually loaning out money that they have. They are merely typing those dollars into existence on a computer. You may be inclined to believe that this money is based on some physical backing like gold, but you would be mistaken. The Federal Reserve hasn't owned any gold since the 1930s.
The Federal Reserve does not own any gold at all. We have not owned gold since 1934. So we have not engaged in any gold swaps.
When the Federal Reserve loans money to the U.S. government gives the Federal Reserve government bonds in exchange. These bonds are simply written promises to pay back the money that was loaned to them with interest through taxation. So to be clear here, the government is taking out a loan from a bank that is creating that money out of thin air, and they're expecting you, the taxpayer, to cover that loan. The absurdity of this arrangement is even more obvious when you realize that up until 1913, the U.S. government created its own money and had no need for a bank to play the part of a middleman. That new money loaned out by the Federal Reserve enters circulation through the banks, accumulates in the banks, and in the end the banks end up holding all the cards, not necessarily for the reasons you may imagine. Contrary to popular belief, the majority of money in circulation isn't actually created by the Federal Reserve, but rather by the ordinary banks that businesses and individuals use for their checking, savings, and mortgages. How is this possible? Well, like the Federal Reserve, ordinary banks are allowed to loan out money that they don't have. There are, of course, restrictions. Banks are only allowed to loan out 10 times the amount of money that they actually have. So if Wells Fargo has $1,000, they can loan you $10,000, and they expect you to pay back that $10,000 plus interest. This is called fractional reserve banking. 75% of all money in circulation is created in this manner. Now, as bad as this may seem, this is really only the tip of the iceberg. Most banks structure payment plans so that for many years, you're paying almost nothing but interest, and only start paying down the principal gradually. The result of this strategy is that in most cases, you pay far more in interest when you purchase a house than the house itself is worth. So here's the real question. If all money is created through loans, where does the money come from to pay for the interest? Let's say we reset the system to zero, loan $1,000 into existence, and charge 7% interest. We now have a total of $1,000 in the system. But we owe $1,000 plus interest, and that's more. The interest ensures that there's always more debt than money in circulation, because the money to pay the interest doesn't exist. Never has, never will. This would be obvious if there was only one loan being issued to one person in this manner, but when performed on a global scale, the reality is hidden and is transformed into a game of musical chairs where the person ending up without a seat faces bankruptcy and financial ruin. Because every dollar in existence is tied to a debt, this creates an unseen force that draws those dollars back to the banks, kind of like gravity attracts a physical object to Earth. The catch here is that it's the labor of the people that moves that money. Every hour that you work to pay back a loan or to keep the government from throwing you in jail over income taxes is an hour worked for the banks. The total receipts from personal income taxes just barely covers the interest on the national debt. And even the principal for that debt all ends up back in the hands of the banks. And remember, that bank created that money out of nothing. Once you understand that the money that banks loan out isn't actually an asset, but is in fact a piece of legal fiction, it should be clear that you're working for these banks for free. This is a cleverly disguised form of slavery. If you manage to pay your monthly payments, then you are a successful slave, and you are allowed to keep the material comforts that come with that status. But if for some reason you fail to make those monthly payments, then the bank or the IRS comes to take your house, your car, and anything else you have of value. And if somehow, even with this enormous financial advantage, the banks still get themselves into trouble, you, the taxpayer, will be forced to bail them out. No matter what, the banks win. To say the game is rigged is an understatement. You might be inclined to think that if you live outside the United States and you don't use dollars, then this situation has no bearing on your life. But you would be wrong. The dollar is both the world reserve currency and the only currency in which oil is sold on global markets. This is often referred to as the petrodollar status. This means that wherever you live, whether your country is an oil exporter or an oil importer, you are affected. If your country is an oil importer, then you are affected by the fact that in order to keep your country running, you have to acquire dollars. To acquire those dollars, you have to send goods and services to the United States or to someone else who did. Likewise, if your country is an oil exporter, you are affected by the fact that you send your oil to the U.S. in exchange for this debt-based money. You are exchanging something of real and tangible value for digits on a screen. And if for some reason the leadership of your country grows tired of this arrangement and tries to pull off the dollar, you'll quickly find the United States military at your doorstep ready to open up a can of democracy on you. Iraq learned this the hard way when they switched their oil sales to euros in 2000, and Libya when they tried to organize a gold-based currency for Africa. Debt-based money is a masterpiece of social engineering, the ultimate tool of the ruling elite. Yet in reality, the whole thing is nothing more than a construct of belief. Our chains are the chains of the mind, and the path to freedom must also begin in the mind. If we want a better future for our children and grandchildren, then we must work right now to reach a critical mass of awakening.
Just how rich and powerful is Lord Evelyn Rothschild? Historically, the Rothschild family wealth was hidden in underground vaults. The Rothschilds' secret financial records were never audited and never accounted for. Their family commissioned biographies give the illusion that their family fortune has dwindled, but researchers estimate their wealth at close to $500 trillion, more than half the wealth of the entire world. Besides their many castles, palace mansions, wineries, racehorses, and exotic resorts, the Rothschilds bought Reuters in the 1800s. Reuters then bought the Associated Press, which selects and delivers the same news stories to the entire world, day after day. They have controlling interest in 3 major television networks and easily avoid media attention since they own it. They also fix the world price of gold on a daily basis and profit from its ups and downs. Over the centuries, the Rothschilds have amassed trillions of dollars worth of gold bullion in their subterranean vaults and have cornered the world's gold supply. They own controlling interest in the world's largest oil company, Royal Dutch Shell. They operate phony charities and offshore banking services where the wealth of the black nobility and the Vatican is hidden in secret accounts at Rothschild Swiss banks, trusts, and holding companies. Although Evelyn Rothschild looks like a harmless gray-haired old man, make no mistake about it, Rothschild and his ancestors have handpicked presidents, crashed stock markets, bankrupted nations, orchestrated wars, and sponsored the mass murder and impoverishment of millions.
are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed.
On June 4, 1963, President Kennedy signed Executive Order 11110. This executive order empowered the U.S. Treasury to issue real money without the Fed. It would have worked. Kennedy's plan to dismantle the Federal Reserve machine had begun. 6 months later, John F. Kennedy went to Dallas and never returned.
No way they could do that!
The new president, Lyndon Johnson, threw out Kennedy's order. And since JFK, no president has dared confront the secret powers behind the Federal Reserve.
In 1945, the Bretton Woods Agreement established the dollar as the world reserve currency, which meant that international commodities were priced in dollars. The agreement, which gave the United States a distinct financial advantage, was made under the condition that those dollars would remain redeemable for gold at a consistent rate of $35 per ounce. The United States promised not to print very much money, but this was on the honor system, because the Federal Reserve refused to allow any audits or supervision of its printing presses. In the years leading up to 1970, expenditures in the Vietnam War made it clear to many countries that the U.S. was printing far more money than it had in gold. And in response, they began to ask for their gold back. This, of course, set off a rapid decline in the value of the dollar. The situation climaxed in 1971 when France attempted to withdraw its gold and Nixon refused. On August 15th, he made the following announcement.
I have directed the Secretary of the Treasury to take the action necessary to defend the dollar against the speculators. I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets, except in amounts and conditions determined to be in the interest of monetary stability and in the best interest of the United States.
This was obviously not a temporary suspension, as he claimed, but rather a permanent default. And for the rest of the world who had entrusted the United States with their gold, it was outright theft. In 1973, President Nixon asked King Faisal of Saudi Arabia to accept only U.S. dollars as payment for oil and to invest any excess profits in U.S. Treasury bonds, notes, and bills. In return, Nixon offered military protection for Saudi oil fields. The same offer was extended to each of the world's key oil-producing countries, and by 1975, every member of OPEC had agreed to only sell their oil in U.S. dollars. The act of moving the dollar off of gold and tying it to foreign oil instantly forced every oil-importing country in the world to start maintaining a constant supply of Federal Reserve paper. And in order to get that paper, they would have to send real physical goods to America. This was the birth of the petrodollar. Paper went out, everything America needed came in, and the United States got very, very rich as a result. It was the largest financial con in recorded history. The arms race of the Cold War was a game of poker. Military expenditures were the chips, and the U.S. had an endless supply of chips. With the petrodollar under its belt, it was able to raise the stakes higher and higher, outspending every other country on the planet, until eventually U.S. military expenditures surpassed that of all other nations in the world combined. The Soviet Union never had a chance. The collapse of the communist bloc in 1991 removed the last counterbalance to American military might. The United States was now an undisputed superpower with no rival. Many hoped that this would mark the beginning of a new era of peace and stability. Unfortunately, there were those in high places who had other ideas. Within that same year, the U.S. invaded Iraq in the first Gulf War. And after crushing the Iraqi military and destroying their infrastructure, including water purification plants and hospitals, crippling sanctions were imposed which prevented that infrastructure from being rebuilt. These sanctions, which were initiated by Bush Sr. and sustained throughout the entire Clinton administration, lasted for over a decade and were estimated to have killed over 500,000 children. The Clinton administration was fully aware of these figures.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And, you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it.
Miss Albright, what exactly was it that was worth killing 500,000 kids for? In November of 2000, Iraq began selling its oil exclusively in euros. This was a direct attack on the dollar and on U.S. financial dominance, and it wasn't going to be tolerated. In response, the U.S. government, with the assistance of the mainstream media, began to build up a massive propaganda campaign claiming that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and was planning to use them. In 2003, the U.S. invaded, and once they had control of the country, oil sales were immediately switched back to dollars. This is particularly notable due to the fact that switching back to the dollar meant a 15 to 20% loss in revenue due to the euro's higher value. It doesn't make any sense at all unless you take the petrodollar into account. Colin Powell, who led the charge to war with Iraq by presenting false evidence to the UN in 2003, is also currently on the CFR Board of Directors.
Indeed, the facts and Iraq's behavior show that Saddam Hussein and his regime are concealing their efforts to produce more weapons of mass destruction. My colleagues, every statement I make today is backed up by sources, solid sources. These are not assertions. What we're giving you are facts and conclusions based on solid intelligence.
Those weapons of mass destruction got to be somewhere. Nope, no weapons over there.
political theatre, it's easy for parties to change the script to suit the scene when support's not going their way. But are American voters willing to read between the lines and work out what's really meant? Artism Report Naya tries to find out.
The art of politics is made up of many things. Handshakes, smiles, and a good arsenal of verbal camouflage.
Americans have a lot of trouble dealing with reality. Americans have trouble facing the truth.
Or as the late American comedian George Carlin put it, euphemistic language that conceals reality.
Poor people used to live in slums. Now the economically disadvantaged occupy substandard housing in the inner cities. And they're broke. They're broke. They don't have a negative cash flow position. They're broke.
And today, America's love affair with semantics has given birth to a new phrase to describe the rich.
Job creators in America basically are on strike.
Increasing taxes on job creators.
This administration and this president, policies are hostile to job creators.
Instead of just saying the wealthy who make over $250,000 a year, if you say job creator, then you say, well, we can't raise their taxes. They're the ones who create jobs. When in reality, when their taxes were higher under Bill Clinton, 3 times as many jobs were created.
The propensity to add softer terms to the English lexicon has surged over the decades, particularly when it comes to military-related language.
There's a condition in combat, most people know about it. It's when a fighting person's nervous system has been stressed to its absolute peak and maximum, can't take any more input. The nervous system has either snapped or is about to snap. In the First World War, that condition was called shell shock.
Today, the same condition is known as an 8-syllable hyphenated phrase void of any emotion.
Post-traumatic stress disorder.
The aftermath of war includes post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah. For those of you suffering from PTSD,
when it comes to wars, where you have the most damaging euphemisms, like when instead of saying innocent civilians were killed, in a drone strike, you say there was collateral damage. Collateral damage, which to me is the worst expression. No, it's innocent men, women, and children were killed. And collateral damage sounds like a real estate transaction.
Allied soldiers shooting each other has become known as
friendly fire.
Kidnapping and transferring a terrorist suspect is called
extraordinary rendition.
And the torture America's war prisoners might endure is referred to as
enhanced interrogation.
In most cases, these new words are used by people trying to define an argument or frame it in a way that will support the position that they're advocating.
And during the last U.S. presidential election, a certain demographic of voters became otherwise known as
without low information voters.
Obama went to Twitter at 2 o'clock today to encourage low information voters.
I think low information voters are stupid people, but you say low information voters because it sounds nice. Although in their defense, it could be people who are just too busy, you know, with their lives, their family, and their work, that they don't have time to focus on the election until the very last minute, and then they vote based on the hairstyle of the candidate running for president.
As America's political elite continues creating new vocabulary to soften the hard truth, a greater focus could instead be put into asking why so many issues need to be rephrased before being presented to the public. George Carlin created comedy about the strategy, but it was George Orwell who first coined a term for it. Newspeak. Reporting from New York, Marina Portnaya, RT.
Review time, partner! And breaking news. To all of you who don't like conspiracy theorists, all of y'all who don't like truthers, who want to call truthers crazy, your fun is over. Those days of you having the illusion of credibility are over. The truth prevails over your ignorance. The truth is universal. You can try to say, oh, truthers are white supremacists. How does that work? Whatever you want to say. You've been demonizing 9/11 truthers all these years. You're demonizing Sandy Hook truthers. Well, if it was a real conspiracy, don't you think the media would talk about it? Don't you think it would be on the front page of the news? Don't you think? Well, if it was a real government conspiracy, why do you think they would let that be on the news? Because you know the news stations are bought and paid for. You know the news, they read off a script, right? You know the news reporters do that, right? No, you don't know that? No, I trust my news. They are more credible than you. You are just some truther. I watch the news and I get informed. You get informed, don't you? Those reporters, they give you exclusive information.
It's the third time I've said that. I'll probably say it 3 more times. See, in my line of work, you got to keep repeating things over and over and over again for the truth to sink in, to kind of catapult the propaganda.
Now, you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
Well, if you filled up your gas tank lately, then you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are back on the rise.
But you don't need us to tell you that gas prices are back on the rise.
You don't need us to tell you gas prices are on the rise. I know.
President, earlier this year you told us you had ordered your administration to cease and desist on payments to journalists to promote your agenda. You cited the need for ethical concerns and the need for a bright line between the press and the government. Your administration continues to make the use of video news releases, which are prepackaged news stories sent to television stations, fully aware that some or many of these stations will air them without any disclaimer that they are produced by the government. Comptroller General of the United States this week said that raises ethical questions. Does it raise ethical questions about the use of government money to produce stories about the government that wind up being aired with no disclosure that they were produced by the government?
There is a Justice Department opinion that says these pieces are within the law so long as they're based upon facts, not advocacy. And I expect our agencies to adhere to that ruling, to that Justice Department opinion. This has been a long-standing practice of the federal government to use these types of videos. Agricultural Department, as I understand, has been using these videos for a long period of time. The Defense Department, other departments have been doing so. It's important that they be based upon the guidelines set out by the Justice Department. Now, I think it'd be helpful if local stations then disclose to their viewers if that's, that this was based upon a factual report and they chose to use it. But evidently in some cases that's not the case. So anyway.
To guarantee that's happening by including that language in the prepackaged report.
Yeah, I don't, oh, you mean a disclosure? I'm George W. Bush and I.
Well, some way to make sure it couldn't air without the disclosure that you believe is so vital.
Ken, I mean, there's a procedure that we're going to follow, and the local stations ought to, if there's a deep concern about that, ought to tell their viewers what they're watching.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be able to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television. Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on his late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night TV.
Conan O'Brien may be about to push the envelope on late-night television.
For these anchors to ask no questions, do no fact-checking, and hold no differing interpretation of the news they're delivering is not only absurd, It's downright dangerous.
Certainly there were commentators and others, pundits at Fox News that were helpful to the White House. And certainly, certainly we got talking points to those people.
Call Sean, call Bill, call whoever. Did you do that as a regular thing?
It wasn't necessarily something I was doing, but it was something that we at the White House, yes, were doing, and getting them talking points and making sure they knew where we were coming from.
So you were giving them talking points.
But I would separate the journalists.
That's important.
Yeah.
You were using these commentators as your spokespeople.
Well, certainly. I mean, certainly. I think that happens to both ways when people go on other networks as well that are favorable towards the Democrats and so forth.
Nobody's ever fed me any crap like that, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you're an independent-minded guy.
Thank you. But aren't you a little embarrassed by the fact that your White House used a television network which is purportedly fair and balanced as your mouthpiece?
I think everybody in this town uses people that are going to be helpful to their cause to try to shape the narrative to their advantage. Again, I would separate the journalists, because the journalists that I worked with were people just like the rest of the White House press corps who were trying to report the news.
So you wouldn't use Fred Hume as somebody to sell stuff for, but you'd use the nighttime guys.
Yeah, I would separate that out, and certainly, you know, and they'll say that that's because they agree with those views in the White House.
Well, they didn't need a script, though, did they?
Well, probably not.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny's step this year.
In consumer news, economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Economic factors may take some spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year. Economic factors may take some of the spring out of the Easter Bunny step this year.
Review time, partner. And I am so tired of this deception right here. This is what got you in a chokehold. The left versus the right. Left wing versus right wing. Don't you know the wings are of the same bird? A little corrupt bird. Republican versus Democrat. They got you cheering for teams. They got you in this tribalism mentality. You don't even understand it. They screwing you over. I'm going to show you how it works in this video. Now, you get here John McCain over here talking about, oh, how the government shutdown was bad. Then you get people to agree with him and say, oh, John McCain is actually speaking some sense. He's right. It's the Republicans' fault. The Democrats love this little interview because, you know, it makes the Republicans look bad and gives them a reason to cheer for the blue team. Yeah, you're cheering for the blue team, but you're getting screwed over with this Obamacare. You're going to get McCain saying it was a bad idea to shut down the government because they wanted to repeal Obamacare. And what you gonna do? Replace it with Romney Care, the same thing. That's where Obamacare came from, Romney Care. You see what I'm saying? Either way it go, we would have had this same type of health plan. Guess who else had the health plan? Hillary Clinton. You see, these New World Order compliant candidates, they are backed by Wall Street. You don't have a real choice unless you go outside the Republicans and Democrats. This is how they keep screwing you over. Let's get into the video.
Thank you, Martha.
You know, I've heard a lot of veterans so emotional to the point of tears over this issue. Talk to me about how you think this has been handled by the White House.
Oh, I think it's been terribly handled by the White House, but let's have a little straight talk, Martha.
Straight talk.
They wouldn't have had the opportunity to handle it that way if we had not shut down the government on a fool's errand.
That's when the Democrats start cheering. Go ahead, get your cheer on.
That we were not going to accomplish. The whole premise of shutting down the government was the repeal of Obamacare. I fought against Obamacare harder than any of the people who wanted to shut down the government.
I bet you did.
I campaigned all over this country in 2012 saying elect Mitt Romney and we'll repeal and replace Obamacare.
But see, that's so dumb. Obamacare is the same thing as Romney Care. See, it's all about getting you to cheer for the team. Check this out right here.
Convinced that Republicans will win in November, and we will regain our majorities in both the Senate and the House.
Go ahead, Republicans, start cheering. Why are you blinking like that? Well, stop blinking like that. What's your problem?
And we will win House seats right here in Arizona. We will lead in Arizona.
Can you get to the point? Jeez, this uneventful speech.
And when we do, we will stop the out-of-control spending and tax increases and repeal and replace Obamacare.
And they cheering. But repeal and replace Obamacare means they're going to put in Romney Care, which is the same doggone thing. Think I'm lying. Think I'm lying. We're going to look at this later. But let me see. Here we go.
Governor Romney said this has to be done on a bipartisan basis. This was a bipartisan idea. In fact, it was a Republican idea. And Governor Romney, at the beginning of this debate, wrote and said, what we did in Massachusetts could be a model for the nation. And I agree that the Democratic legislators in Massachusetts might have given some advice to Republicans in Congress about how to cooperate.
Listen to them now.
But the fact of the matter is, we use the same advisors, and they say it's the same plan.
Wow. The same doggone plan. Let's look at this.
There are some terrific Republican ideas. Mitt Romney in Massachusetts has initiated mandatory insurance so that everybody has to buy in, but then the government helps out those who can't afford it. Those kinds of bold initiatives, I think the Democrats have to put forward
bold as heck.
If, in fact, we can credibly claim that we can run the country and not simply criticize on the sidelines.
Now, this is key. This is in 2006. You see, he's praising this individual mandate, too. It's funny he's doing that. So either way it go, we would have had this Obamacare, Romney Care plan. But remember, I said Hillary ran on that plan as well. Obama didn't seem to like the individual mandate. That's how he got elected. Well, one of the reasons that made him look good, because he said he wasn't for individual mandate. Let's check it out right here.
Didn't represent her properly. They misrepresent her. Did they, and what do you say about that?
Well, obviously, I think that they represented her position properly, which is that she supported, in the past, NAFTA, which has been pretty hard on Ohio. And we've had an ongoing discussion about health care. Both of us want to provide health care to all Americans. There's a slight difference, and her plan is a good one, but...
Slight difference. This is the slight difference he's talking about. Check this out.
She mandates that everybody buy health care. She'd have the government force every individual to buy insurance.
Which is what Obamacare is.
And I don't have such a mandate because I don't think the problem is that the people don't want health insurance. It's that they can't.
No, I don't want it. I don't want health insurance.
Afford it. So I focus more on lowering costs. And this is a modest difference, but it's one that she's tried to elevate arguing that because I don't force people to buy health care that I'm not insuring everybody. Well, if things were that easy, I could mandate everybody buy a house, and that would solve the problem of homelessness. It doesn't.
Uh-oh, watch out, y'all. He might do that next. So there you go. Obama with his lying self. Y'all need to stop with this. You're over here arguing, acting like you're against Obamacare, you Republicans. And they're talking about repeal and replace Obamacare with the same thing. What the heck is your problem? Get out of this tribalism mentality. And people who would say, oh, we need Hillary Clinton. Well, she down for the same plan. It's the same thing. It's the same scheme. And why in the heck do we have a president who not only tries to sell us on a product, but forces us to buy it and penalizes us if we don't?
Precisely because the product is good. I want the cash registers to work. I want the checkout lines to be smooth. So I want people to be able to get this great product.
Has the nation's largest cocaine smuggler been revealed to be the Drug Enforcement Agency? Well, for decades, it's been rumored that the United States government was secretly sponsoring the smuggling of cocaine into the country. Federal officials have long denied such speculation, pointing out the billions of dollars spent intercepting drugs. Newly released documents and testimony from Justice Department and DEA officials now show the stories of government running cocaine are in fact true. An investigation conducted in Mexico found the American government allowed that country's largest drug cartel, Sinaloa, to operate without fear of persecution. That group is estimated to be responsible for 80% of the cocaine coming into the United States through Chicago. In exchange, the leaders of Sinaloa provided the Drug Enforcement Agency in Washington, D.C. information on their rival gangs. The drug cartel working with the federal government is run by Joaquin El Capo Guzman. He is considered to be the world's most powerful drug trafficker. And in addition to Chicago, his group also maintains cocaine operations in several major cities around the nation. Written statements were provided to a U.S. district court in Chicago confirming the alliance between the DEA and Mexico's largest cocaine cartel. The written testimony, combined with other evidence, shows the Drug Enforcement Agency officials met with leaders of the Sinaloa cartel more than 50 times between 2000 and 2012. This would mean DEA-authorized drug smuggling goes back to at least the beginning of the George W. Bush administration and continued for a year under Barack Obama. One of the group's leaders, Vicente Zambada Nivela, claims that the American government also sent military-grade weapons to the Sinaloa cartel. According to the latest revelations, it was these weapons which were part of the Fast and Furious scandal. Automatic firearms, which disappeared during that operation, led by Eric Holder, were used to kill U.S. border agents. This latest evidence and testimony points towards a massive scandal involving both Republican and Democratic administrations. At the very best, this provides the best evidence so far that the federal government was sponsoring the smuggling of billions of dollars of cocaine into the United States. Worse still, weapons purchased for the United States military have been sent to the cartel and used to kill American agents. Those actions transcend any party politics, and the jury is still out. We'll follow the story and bring you the latest.
Who is this guy? I don't know, but he seemed like a nice old man. Nice old man. No, this right here is David Rockefeller. This guy right here, you need to do some research on David Rockefeller. Feel free to do that whenever you get a chance. But people who know about this man right here, they know he is nothing but trouble.
Rockefellers, come back. We don't want your New World Order, you know? Leave Chile right now. Leave Chile. You are not... You're killing a lot of people. You're killing a lot of people. Leave here. Leave Chile right now. Leave Chile. Leave Chile. We don't want your world government. Leave Chile right now. Leave Chile, okay? Leave Chile. Your family is the most disgusting in the world, you know? Leave here. Leave. You also, you're a traitor to Chile. Mr. Agustino, you're a traitor to Chile, okay? You're a traitor to Chile. What you're doing right now, okay? 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 You know everything. You know everything. You're participating with him. You're participating with him in this. Your world government will fail, okay?
You heard what the man said. Leave Chile. Why was that man so mad at him? You want to know why? Because he knows the Rockefeller family is for the New World Order agenda. What is the New World Order agenda? Well, that is the plan of this secretive elite, this cabal, to bring about a one world government. And not only a one world government, but a one world currency. And not only a one world currency, but a one world religion to glue it all together, which would mean they would have total control. These small amount of people controlling the whole world has never happened before. What else is going on? Well, depopulation. These guys push for depopulation in third world countries. You can see here, Henry Kissinger. Depopulation should be the highest priority of U.S. foreign policy towards the third world. So what they're doing is systematically killing off large populations of third world countries, and they're working to bring America to third world country status. They control the banks. They control the money. They will do it. That is their plan. And eventually they want to have the population down to an amount where they can control all the people. But you know what? You don't even have to take my word for it.
I had a friend, Nick Rockefeller, okay, who was one of the Rockefeller family. And he, when I was running for governor in Nevada, he came to me, introduced himself to me through an attorney. And we became friends. We started talking about things. And I learned an awful lot from Mr. Rockefeller. And one of the things that we used to talk about was the ultimate plan of the banking industry, what they wanted to accomplish. And the goals of the banking industry, not just the Federal Reserve System, but the private banks in Germany and England, all over Italy, all over the world, they all work together. They're all central banks, and they're all part of the Communist Manifesto. You know, central banking is one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. We talk about America being a capitalistic country, but yet at the same time we have a central bank that plans everything for us, right? And the graduated income tax is another plank of the Communist Manifesto, right? So right there you have two major planks of the Communist Manifesto that have been brought in because of the Federal Reserve System, okay? So the ultimate goal that these people have in mind is the goal to create a one-world government where everybody has an RFID chip implanted in them. All money is to be in those chips, right? There'll be no more cash. And this is given me straight from Rockefeller himself. This is what they want to accomplish. And all money will be in your chips. And so instead of having cash, anytime you have money in your chip, they can take out whatever they want to take out whenever they want to. If they say you owe us this much money in taxes, they just deduct it out of your chip digitally.
Total control.
Total control. And if you're like me or you, and you're protesting what they're doing, they can just turn off your chip. And you have nothing. You can't buy food. You can't do anything. It's total control of the people.
And that chip's connected to a database that has your purchasing records, what you do.
Everything is in there, you know? And so they want a one-world government controlled by them, everybody being chipped, all your money in those chips, and they control the chips, and they control people. And you become a slave. You become a serf to these people. That's their goal. That's their intentions.
And if you look here, he even tells you this is what he is about. Some people believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists, and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it. That's David Rockefeller telling you he wants this new world order. Well, he didn't say new world order. Oh, so you need him to say new world order. Okay. All we need is the right major crisis, and the nations will accept the new world order. See that? That's why you got to pay attention. But before we break it down, I want you to see this.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go wild.
I'm sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
We had a worldview. Republican and Democratic presidents alike, from Harry Truman to George Bush, stood for freedom. and stood for certain propositions that would make America strong and healthy and grow the middle class and shrink poverty and stand against communism. And after 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order, and instead it looks like we got a lot of disorder.
Of its founders.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
If you go outside the city of Atlanta, go east about 60 or 70 miles to the town of Elberton, and then go north on Highway 77 about 10 miles, you'll find off to the right what's called the Georgia Guidestones. It looks kind of like Stonehenge, these big, huge granite rocks set up there. This was done by a guy, we have a pseudonym, came in, paid cash, had this company set these things up in 1980. He called himself R.C. Christian, but that's not his real name. It says right on the stones, a pseudonym, false name. On these Georgia Guidestones, it gives the 10 Commandments for the New World Order. 10 Commandments for the New World Order. The first commandment was to maintain humanity under 500 million. I went there and looked at those things and said, now, hold on a minute. Today's population is 6 billion. They want to maintain humanity under 0.5 billion. Looks like a lot of people got to die for their plan to work, which is, by the way, the plan. Jacques Cousteau said we'd have to eliminate 350,000 people a day. A third of a million people a day would have to be eliminated to save Mother Earth. Bill Clinton said we need to reduce the population of the Earth to 1 billion. There are a lot of folks who would like to reduce the population of the Earth. The Bible command is quite the opposite.
America's place in the New World Order should be? It's always been seen as the global policeman. But as you said before, you know, it's hard to see with all these military conflicts where the winner and loser lies. What should America be doing
I think
globally?
The global policeman should be the United Nations. And I don't think we should need one. I think we should use courts the way we do in civilian life. It's time to put war and conflict, armed conflict behind us and move on and start acting like civilized, educated human beings.
Oh, you're so civilized, Ted. Let's look at your quote. A total population of 250 to 300 million people, a 95% decline from present levels would be ideal. That's Ted Turner, founder of CNN and New World Order supporter. You see, he donated $1 billion to the United Nations. This man is down for the depopulation agenda. He wants a one-child policy for 100 years, yet he got 5 kids. And you got to pay attention, because these jokers will tell you that they selling out. And they do that just so it'll go over your head. So you'll be like, oh, well, they didn't really mean that. They're just being sarcastic. It's not that serious. But then at the same time, people be like, oh, well, I ain't going to believe that unless they tell me. He telling you right here. We get Shaq admitting to the whole world that he's a Freemason and he is proud of it.
What is going on there? That's a ring of my profession. You don't know nothing about that. Okay, can we get a close-up on that area? What? You don't know nothing about
What is the profession?
Yeah, which profession
Look
are you
at
talking
that
about?
man. Woo, that man so happy.
Is it a legal profession?
Of course it's legal. It's a ring of my profession. I'm trying to read it. Okay. It's too many diamonds.
He's like, yep, I'm a Freemason. Ain't nothing you can do.
Are you a Mason? Of course.
And all them jokers around him know what's going on.
The secret ceremony.
Well, you might as well put your pinky out when you drink your drink. Put your pinky out.
Are you involved in the secret ceremonies with the candles and the...
Everyone wears... Anyway, the Clippers. The Clippers.
But that is impressive, Mr. O'Neill.
I don't have a championship.
Anyway, so the Clippers...
Oh, yeah, I have 4.
Those he doesn't wear.
Those he doesn't wear.
The Clippers! Yeah. As I was blinded by success.
Look at that man right there. That's impressive. I'm blinded by success. See, they know what the deal is when you're a Freemason. You know, they get all these movie roles and all these deals. Matter of fact, Shaq was on Grown Ups 2. It was one of the worst movies I have ever seen. Oh my gosh. Terrible. Anyways, he on there. There go your boy Shaq. Shaq's a Freemason. Bring it right back to David Rockefeller. All we need is the right major crisis and the nations will accept the new world order. So they're going to bring out a problem and then they are going to offer a solution. One of their plans is to devalue the dollar so that it barely has any buying power. So then you go to the store, you can barely buy anything. You see the food on the shelf, but you can't afford it. What happens then? People start going crazy. People start to panic. Then people start robbing each other. People start killing each other. So then we need to bring in the police state. Oh, we're asking the government for help. And surely they are here to bring the order out of chaos. But it's not just any order. It is the new world order. And not only that, but they're going to bring about a one world currency to replace the old currency. And then they're going to bring it into a cashless society where you got to get the chip. All your money being on the chip. And also to glue it all together, the one world religion. Where these sellouts come to play, they are new world order compliant. They are here to sell you the agenda. They're going to let you know how cool it is to get a microchip in your arm. Some of y'all might think it's cool, but I know a lot of y'all don't like this type of stuff. So I'm just making sure you are aware of their agenda.
anyway, I've had people calling me saying they go out to their mailbox and they find a little red dot or a little blue dot on their mailbox, and they wonder what the little red dot and blue dot is. Well, it's marking your mailbox by the government, so when foreign troops come in here on us after martial law, if you have a red dot on your mailbox, they take you out immediately and shoot you right in the head. But if you have a blue dot, they take you to the FEMA camps being built by Halliburton right now to house 50 million Americans. They're building enough concentration camps in America by Halliburton that Cheney's getting rich off of, Vice President Cheney's getting rich off of, to put those with the blue dot on your mailbox in those concentration camps. Now, if you go out and you find a pink dot on your mailbox, that means that they believe you'll be a good slave and you're going to go along with the program and serve our international Antichrist masters. So watch for that dot.
Listen to this, folks.
I was pulled to the side road, which was a new cut gravel dirt road in front of a business, a builder supply business. And the right side of the road was filled with, which I thought was portable toilets. I never looked at them that close. Same in color, maybe black, but which was an odd color. And I asked him about the field of black boxes. What were they? Because I'd never seen anything like that. And his statement was that if he told me, I would be one of few people in Madison, Georgia that knew about them. And he says they're disposable coffins, I believe he told me. And he says there's 100, at that time he said there was 125,000 there.
And the brother of the man that owns this field, that the government is leasing this field from to store these disposable coffins, this brother was given 3 years to set up temporary morgues around the country.
An ad hoc legal approach for fighting terrorism. President Obama today proposed something new, something called prolonged detention. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Prolonged detention. Did you ever see the movie Minority Report? It was based on a Philip K. Dick short story. Came out in 2002. It starred Tom Cruise, remember? He played a police officer in something called the Department of Pre-Crime. Pre-crime is where people are arrested and incarcerated to prevent crimes that they have not yet committed.
Mr. Marks, by mandate of the District of Columbia Pre-Crime Division, I'm placing you under arrest for the future murder of Sarah Marks and Donald Dubinos. Take place today, April 22nd, at 0800 hours, 4 minutes. No, I didn't do anything.
You didn't do anything, but you're gonna. Future murder. Creepy, right? Putting somebody in jail not for what they've done, but for what you're very sure they're going to do?
There may be a number of people who cannot be prosecuted for past crimes. In some cases because evidence may be tainted, but who nonetheless pose a threat to the security of the United States.
We're not prosecuting them for past crimes, but we need to keep them in prison because of our expectation of their future crimes.
Al-Qaeda terrorists and their affiliates are at war with the United States, and those that we capture, like other prisoners of war, must be prevented from attacking us again.
Prevented. We will incarcerate people preventively. Preventive incarceration. Indefinite detention without trial. That's what this is. That's what President Obama proposed today, if you strip away the euphemisms. One civil liberties advocate told the New York Times today, quote, "We've known this was on the horizon for many years, but we were able to hold it off with George Bush. The idea that we might find ourselves fighting with the Obama administration over these powers is really stunning. And it is stunning.
Have you heard that the Department of Homeland Security has purchased 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition last year? I mean, that's going to cost millions and millions of dollars. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this country broke? I mean, you turn on the TV, you hear how we're laying off air traffic controllers, how people are going to die because of it. I mean, Harrison Ford is in a tizzy, and we're spending this much money on bullets? Do you know that 1.6 billion rounds of ammunition is enough to fight a 20-year war and still have bullets left over? My question is, who is the Department of Homeland Security planning to shoot? Do you realize that over the past couple of months, our government has tried to pass bills through Congress allowing them to arrest American citizens without due process, allowing them to kill American citizens without due process?
And it's got the 5 regions for the FEMA camps, and it talks about barricades and barbed wire and armed guards, and it says that they've built the camps and that now they need to get ready to staff them, and that they need to be ready within a 72-hour period. And so I want to challenge everybody to call their friends and their families now and realize that the new economy is to put tens of millions of people, we already have the biggest prison population in the world, in this archipelago, this giant chain of facilities all over the country.
The following video details the contents of a Department of Defense document entitled Internment and Resettlement Operations, also known as FM 3-39.40. The document is 325 pages long and it is signed by Joyce E. Morrow, Administrative Assistant to the Secretary of the Army. It was created in 2010, however, has just been recently leaked to the public via the internet and can now be downloaded from multiple sources. In the description below, you'll find a download link for the document. I strongly encourage you to download it yourself and to verify everything that's being said here. The document outlines military procedures for internment and resettlement of civilians, and it describes the layout and the administration of these internment camps. It clearly states on page 38 that it applies within U.S. territory, and it specifically addresses the detainment of U.S. citizens, as is indicated by the identification procedures for new prisoners on page 146, which states that social security numbers are to be recorded alongside their photograph and fingerprints. Included in the list of organizations which may be involved in these internment operations are the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the Department of Defense, and the United Nations. On page 56, the document outlines the responsibilities of psychological operations officers within the camps, among which it states that a PSYOP officer develops and executes indoctrination programs to reduce or remove antagonistic attitudes and identifies political activists. On page 281, the document goes into more detail regarding the role of psychological operations within the camps, specifically in regards to pacifying the population and ensuring cooperation. On page 238, it gives the conditions for the use of deadly force in such camps. Among the justifications for lethal force, it includes to terminate an active escape attempt. That point right there should make it clear that these camps are not benevolent disaster relief type facilities. On page 244, the document calls for the use of snipers during riots to, quote, scan a crowd and identify agitators and riot leaders for apprehension and fire lethal rounds if warranted. On page 260, it shows the basic layout for a facility focusing on detainment. It is depicted with interrogation areas, tribunal areas, and mortuaries. Each detainment facility is designed to hold 4,000 prisoners, and they are depicted with multiple levels of barbed wire separating compartments within the facilities, with a double barbed wire fence enclosing them, and watched over by 24 guard towers. On page 261, the document depicts the layout for what they call civilian resettlement facilities, which are designed to house 8,000 people. Though it uses the word resettlement, the plans show multiple levels of barbed wire dividing the sections of the facility, with double barbed wire fencing on the outside, as well as 16 guard towers. On page 262, the layout for facilities designed for what they call non-compliant prisoners is shown. These camps are designed to hold up to 300 prisoners, they have 3 interrogation centers, and are guarded by 13 guard towers. Now, if there's any question whether these plans are active or just theoretical, this should be settled by the fact that the U.S. Army has been running ads for job positions in these camps since 2009, and apparently, they're still hiring. Once again, if you look in the description, you'll find all the links you need to verify this information. It's important to note here that this document was created in 2010, which was under the Obama administration, and it predates the NDAA of 2012, which authorized military detainment of U.S. citizens. This clearly shows a long-term agenda at work.
saying he's a military police, and he says, and we've been sent footage before by military police and others, so I want this footage of them in briefings openly talking about gun confiscations. Now, that's now in the manuals that they're training to quarantine cities and towns and confiscate guns. We've had Navy SEALs on confirming it. We have the documents. We know that. But footage, not just in some Army manual, but footage could really, really hurt the folks that are trying to covertly prepare the military for basically civil war. Brian, obviously, you've got to go back in right now. Tell us as much as you can and how we get this footage, but describe it for us.
Okay, so I was in a briefing with FEMA. FEMA runs my old unit. I'm actually out now. I got out in September of this year. They were talking about suspension of the Constitution, Second and Fourth Amendment rights being taken away, and I openly asked him, are we going to take guns? He says no, but he says they will. It's clearly on the video. They will, talking about the FEMA guys with us. So that's the gist of the video. You could, I'm filming the floor because it kind of startled me when they said that they're going to suspend the Constitution under martial law, which is pretty scary to me.
Essentially, yeah, we pretty much at that time, your Second Amendment, all your rights, First Amendment rights, pretty much everything is not that moment just interrupted. Yeah.
So you said that martial law suspends their Second Amendment, so I'm not going to, but would you say we would take weapons from people?
Yeah, that's what they do. Yeah.
As a psychiatrist, I remember very well the condemnation by the American Psychiatric Association of Soviet psychiatrists and the Soviet Union for their use of psychiatric techniques and psychiatric medications to control political dissidents. Sadly, shockingly, we in the United States have become those same oppressors. We now have a policy as exemplified by the FBI brochure from the Phoenix Office on Counterterrorism, which says people who are defenders of the U.S. Constitution against federal government and the UN and make numerous references to the U.S. Constitution should be monitored as potentially murderous, and fanatical terrorists, by extension, should be considered mentally unstable. Under the new Freedom Commission, mentally unstable people must be medicated on a compulsory basis with lethal and untested but very profitable psychiatric medications.
Department of Justice memo, which tells local police what should you be looking out for in kind of everyday terrorism prevention and terrorism watch activities. And one of the things that is considered a potential terrorist risk is individuals who harbor doubts about the official story regarding 9/11. The memo adds 9/11 official story skeptics to the growing list of targets.
We're developing a society because of all of these different toxins known to affect brain function. We're seeing a society that not only has a lot more people of lower IQ, but a lot fewer people of higher IQ. In other words, a dumbing down, a chemical dumbing down of society. So everyone's sort of mediocre. That leaves them dependent on government. because they can't excel. We have these people of lower IQ who are totally dependent. Then we have this mass of people who are going to believe anything they're told because they can't really think clearly. And very few people of very high IQ who have good cognitive function who can figure this all out. And that's what they want. So, you know, you can kind of piece it together as to why they are so insistent in spending so many hundreds of millions of dollars of propaganda money to dumb down society.
I think that this bomber isn't Al-Qaeda, isn't anything like that. He's more like, it's a man, he's more like those 9/11 was an inside job kind of guys. They protesting in a violent way, but in a violent way almost like the eco-terrorists, where they don't intend to inflict casualties.
But they do it in the middle of the night.
The middle of the night. He's making a political point.
They could have killed people with it had it been in the day, but they choose to do it at 3 a.m.
The cops have to go over there, and we just talking with the commissioner. He has to go over and said, does that camera store have a security camera? Hey, can we see that? There's no master grid of all the cameras.
A lot of politicians, and I know you talk about that issue all the time, I think people should be careful what they wish for on China. You know, if China were to revalue its currency, or China is to start making, say, toys that don't have lead in them, or food that isn't poisonous, their costs of production are going to go up, and that means prices at Walmart here in the United States are going to go up too. So I would say China is our greatest friend right now. They're keeping prices low. And
mercury-containing vaccines may help, not harm kids, according to 2 new studies in the journal Pediatrics.
An African-American student.
Want to know what I was doing? Shut up.
Please don't tell me to shut up.
As respect.
Why did you have to tell him you were an atheist if you didn't have any trouble reading the oaths? Why didn't you just shut up?
What Jimmy Carter should do is privately give Mr. Bush his opinion and shut up publicly. That would be best for the country.
And it is our duty as loyal Americans to shut up once the fighting begins. Once the war against Saddam begins, we expect every American to support our military, and if they can't do that, to shut up.
Can I just ask a question?
Sure.
What is Fox News? It's just a parade of propaganda, isn't it? It's just a festival of ignorance. Why, 1 million people are dead in Iraq. Come on, this is ridiculous. What's the point of this? This is insane.
Well,
go out, people
Fox
at home.
News.
Go outside. Go hug your
Lee,
children.
you should be more.
Well,
Fox News should be more worried.
Love your family. You know.
And you get all the news. Hillary Clinton is running.
All the news you can at Fox News.
Many infectious diseases can be brought completely under control when vaccination against them is practiced universally.
We want people to be more educated because we don't feel like the truth is being told about thimerosal and about vaccines and about what the harm that it's doing to our children.
People have to realize that these flu vaccines contain thimerosal. Thimerosal is a mercury preservative which has been directly linked to the autism epidemic that we have seen burst onto the scene over the past 10-15 years.
Dr. Kurt Wooler believes the preservative is fueling a sharp rise in autism. 1 in 5,000 children had the developmental disorder in the late 1980s. Now 1 in 166 kids lives with autism.
An increase in the amount of thimerosal injected into their bodies. Dr. Boyd Haley is a mercury poisoning expert at the University of Kentucky. He believes it is possible thimerosal could be responsible for neurological brain damage, especially for children who don't naturally get mercury out of their system.
It's one of the most toxic compounds I know of. I mean, I can't think of anything that's absolutely more lethal.
You can see that in this University of Calgary experiment. Mercury quickly destroys this neuron.
It's really medical insanity. Just still allowing this neurotoxin that has damaged thousands and thousands of kids. I can't tell you, I'm really sick and tired of seeing one kid after the next come through my office who I know, clear cut, has been damaged by thimerosal in their vaccines.
Thimerosal is a preservative that's been in vaccines for decades, so literally hundreds of millions of people have received thimerosal.
As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot, under EPA guidelines, he would have to be 275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
For years, science didn't support suspicions about the preservative. But recently, the National Autism Association used CDC's own data to conclude children are 27 times more likely to develop autism with exposure to mercury-containing vaccines.
99% of the public really doesn't even realize that mercury is being used as a preservative in the vaccinations that they're taking themselves and giving their children. So, in essence, you know, they're just blindly lining up to get flu shots.
Edward L. Bernays is regarded by many as the father of public relations. He was born in Vienna, Austria. Bernays was the nephew of Sigmund Freud. Bernays pioneered the use of psychology and other social sciences to design public persuasion campaigns. He published several scholarly works, still used in universities worldwide today. And he also spearheaded the national campaign to fluoridate the water supply of America through the Fluoridationist of the Public Health Service.
This is one pollutant that we capture in the phosphate fertilizer industry, and having captured it, we can't dump it into the sea, but we put it into our own drinking water. It's extraordinary.
Fluoride in our water supply is a very real and ever-present risk to our population at large.
Dennis, let's make sure we're clear on this. Fluoride, it is in tea, it's in coffee, it's in water, it's in bread, it's in toothpaste, but it's actually a poison, right?
It sure is, and here's the quickest evidence. Go to your bathroom and pick up your toothpaste, and you'll see a warning that if a child swallows more than a pea-sized amount of toothpaste, call poison control.
Wow.
The protected pollutant status that fluoride enjoys within EPA and other federal establishments is remarkable, as the charts over here show.
Last November, concerns over excess fluoride prompted the American Dental Association to warn parents not to mix baby formula with tap water during an infant's first 12 months.
Phyllis Mullenix found that fluoride in very modest doses produces effects in laboratory animals resembling attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder.
She says, "Do you have any idea what you're saying?" And he says, "You're telling us that we're reducing the IQ of children." And basically I said, yes.
Scientists like Nobel Prize winner Arvid Carlson and a large group of EPA scientists have called for the banning of fluoride because we don't know how much we're ingesting, so we don't know if we're being poisoned.
Fluoride can also build up in the bones to cause pain, stiff joints, and skeletal abnormalities when they get older.
It's a cumulative poison. It just gradually builds up and it gradually causes harm.
Do you know when fluoride was first put in drinking water? In the Nazi concentration camp. Stands back in amazement, can't believe it. This is Charles Perkins, a chemist who wrote to the Lee Foundation for Nutritional Research, Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1954, and this is what he wrote. In the 1930s, Hitler and the German Nazis envisaged a world to be dominated and controlled by a Nazi philosophy of pan-Germanism. The German chemists worked out a very ingenious and far-reaching plan of mass control, which was submitted to and adopted by the German General Staff. This plan was to control the population in any given area through mass medication of drinking water supplies. By this method, they could control the population in whole areas, reduce population by water medication that would induce sterility in women, and so on. In this scheme of mass control, sodium fluoride occupied a prominent place. That's what it's about.
Hey, what's happening, Staff Sergeant?
How you doing?
Hey, my name's Adam.
Nice to meet you.
I was in the Marines. I do a YouTube channel now called Adam versus the Man. You mind telling me what it's like being here for inauguration?
It's a great thing to be here.
Right on. Can I ask about what you think of President Obama?
Well, I support our new leader, and that's pretty much all I really feel about that.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Support our leader. Hey, our new Commander-in-Chief, go Obama! Tell us your moment to shine. Get off the
So when you enlisted, you swore an oath to the Constitution, right?
Yes.
And do you think Obama's policies are constitutional?
I don't really follow politics too much.
So you swore an oath with your life to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and you have no idea what that means.
Hey, sounds good to me, sir, if that's the way you want to put it.
Really? That's it?
That's it.
That sounds pretty dangerous. It sounds like following orders without question.
Nope, I just do what I'm told by my leaders, so that's pretty much it. I leave the politics to other people.
So you do follow orders without question?
From my leaders, yes.
Yeah. So if they told you to do something that was immoral, you wouldn't question it. You wouldn't wonder what the basis of that was, or where that order came from, or what its real purpose was. You just do it because someone told you to, and they're paying your paycheck.
Hey, whatever you want to say, sir.
Hey, don't call me sir. I was a sergeant.
There you go.
I worked for a living.
Okay.
But I got out and I found out what was wrong with following orders without questioning them. And I found out that when I was in Fallujah in 2004 with the Marine Corps Civil Affairs team, we weren't really serving the people or protecting people. We were serving the politicians and the banksters and the war profiteers. I mean, doesn't that bother you to know that you're a pawn in all that, and that you allow it to happen by just following orders without question?
Hey, whatever way you feel, sir.
Well, I'm asking how you feel.
It's not really important how I feel.
Feelings been conditioned out of you? You're a soldier now?
However you feel, sir.
Well, is there anything else you want to say on the subject for posterity?
No, sir.
Well, let me tell you, hey, you got to stop calling me sir, man.
All right, sir.
Staff Sergeant? Oh, all right, I see how it is. Well, there's an organization called Oath Keepers, and it's about people who take their oath to that Constitution seriously and want to make sure that things like what happened in Katrina, where there were soldiers and National Guard troops asked to take away citizens' firearms who were trying to defend themselves, or troops being used against the American citizens. They want to make sure that doesn't happen. Would you be interested in having a little a more understanding of your oath and commitment to the Constitution that you swore an oath to support and defend?
I'm good the way I am, sir.
Really? Doesn't that make you part of the problem?
Hey, if there's a problem, I'm not aware of it.
Is ignorance bliss?
Could be, sir.
Could be. I don't think you're as dumb as you make yourself out to be. I think you're playing me off.
Might be, sir.
You might be. I'm pretty confident in that, actually.
All right.
You're smarter, aren't you? You know what I'm talking about.
Well, I got a job to do, sir.
What's your name, Staff Sergeant?
Bob.
What's your last name, Staff Sergeant?
That's all I got, sir.
You're a public servant, are you not?
Sounds good to me, sir.
You don't want any kind of accountability for what you're saying, do you?
No, sir.
Well, you don't have any name badge on. Special Police, Staff Sergeant Bob. Thank you for your time. I hope you'll at least take the advice of an older veteran and think about some of these issues.
Have a good day, sir.
All right, appreciate it.
Yep.
For those of you who don't know, Monsanto is a company in the agriculture business, and they are known for patenting different types of seeds. They've done so with cotton seeds, they've done so with corn seeds. So it's something that they have done to kind of take over the food industry, right? And they've been in the middle of a lot of different controversy, but they are also known for genetically modified foods, right? Genetically modified seeds. And a lot of our corn is genetically modified, thanks to Monsanto. Now, scientists in France just recently did a study to see what the effects of genetically modified corn are on rats, right? Now, this is really interesting because there has been a lack of scientific evidence that would indicate whether or not genetically modified foods, like genetically modified corn, are safe and okay for human consumption. So what they found was that these rats developed mammary tumors, and they also had severe damage on some of their organs, including the liver and kidney. So those are pictures indicating what happened to the rats that were fed genetically modified corn.
They do not appear to be okay. It's not the picture of what I would call safe.
So, of course, Monsanto is, completely debating the findings of this study. They're very, very aggressive in fighting anyone that says anything negative about them, right? But there was an excellent documentary done. It was called The World According to Monsanto. And, they talked about the lack of oversight with the FDA when it came to genetically modified seeds. So let's take a look at a part of that documentary that explains it in greater detail.
The reason why GM crops are here is based on a deception that occurred in the FDA. They said that these foods are not different. They use the word substantially equivalent. They use the word not meaningfully or uniformly different. And what that turned into was a terminology called generally recognized as safe, or GRAS. Typically, if something is to be considered generally recognized as safe, it needs lots of peer-reviewed published studies and an overwhelming consensus among the scientific community. With GM crops, they had neither.
So, of course, Monsanto will come back and say, no, we have a bunch of studies, okay? These are studies that indicate that these foods are completely safe. However, if you do a little research into these studies, you'll find that they were in the middle of controversy because a lot of those studies were falsified. Okay.
Wow. Now, and I'm sure that it wasn't scientists that Monsanto was paying to do those studies. No. They wouldn't. And I'm sure those people have no biases whatsoever.
Now, during the Reagan administration, Monsanto was trying to, put out these genetically modified foods for human consumption. And it's really interesting because George Bush Sr. went to one of their factories, and look at this exchange. I think it's very illustrative of what happens in politics.
When George Bush Sr. toured the company's headquarters, he was Ronald Reagan's vice president, and deregulation was this Republican administration's watchword. The intention was to boost industry by eliminating what White House hardliners called bureaucratic hurdles, like health and environmental safety testing, which were Monsanto's key problems.
We have before USDA right now a request to test this for the first time on a farm in Illinois this year. And
get hallucinating about it, we'll lose it up here.
Yes, we will.
And then the expense goes out and nothing happens because you can't.
Yeah, and I would say, quite frankly, we have no complaint about the way USDA is handling it. They're going through an orderly process. They're making sure that as they deal with these new things, they do them properly. And now, if we're waiting until September and we don't have our authorization, we may say something different.
Call me. We're in the dereg business.
Call me. We're in the dereg business.
Yeah, ain't that's the God's honest truth. Saying, hey, listen, man, don't worry about testing it in rats, et cetera, et cetera. You just call us, the Republican Party, and we'll make that thing happen for you.
So what they also do is, they have these genetically modified seeds, and what they're doing is, first of all, they take out a patent for these seeds, okay? Because they do a lot of scientific research and put a lot of money into doing it, so I can understand the patents. But at the same time, they are taking conventional seeds off the market. They're striking deals with different farmers throughout the world. This is a multinational corporation. And what they're doing is they're promising that these genetically modified seeds will have higher yields. So they go into countries like India and they say, hey, look, we have this genetically modified cotton seed. It's known as BT cotton. And what it'll do is it'll not only produce a higher yield, but it is basically resistant to any type of, weeds, pests, any type of thing that would ruin your crops. So these farmers in India started signing the contracts and they started buying the seeds.
Now understand why they would do that. They're going to increase their output, they're told,
right.
And they think, well, that's great, and I'm not going to lose more of my crops to all these problems that I've had in the past. So it's very enticing. But then the second part happens.
So what happens is they slowly but surely start taking conventional cotton seeds off the market. So these farmers in India become dependent on buying the genetically modified cotton seed. Well, what happens then? Monsanto will mark up the prices to 4 times the price. Okay?
That's the part they didn't tell you in the beginning.
So then these farmers in India have no choice but to take out these loans that later on they can't pay back. So what is the result of that? Well, let's watch the video.
But this is the cotton growing area. The result of the BT cotton is the first year 600 suicides from June 2005 to June 2006. Second year, still today, within 6 months, 680 suicides. So it's a disaster.
It's a complete disaster, yes. All these technologies, either it is GM or biotechnology, they are actually making the farmers completely dependent on the market. Because not only that you have to pay more for the seed procurement, but you have to fertilize. And this very claim that no spraying is required, no pesticide required, is also false.
When Monsanto claims in advertising that GM crops are adapted for small farmers, what do you think it's?
Our experience shows that it is completely false.
So, as he mentioned, in 1 year there were 600 farmers who committed suicide because they simply couldn't pay back their loans, they filed for bankruptcy, they lost everything, and they just had nothing else to turn to. And by the way, I just want to be crystal clear that suicides among farmers in India it happens for other reasons as well because of extreme poverty. But in that documentary, they were specifically focusing on farmers who had to file for bankruptcy because they couldn't pay back those loans.
Now, people are so concerned that in Norway, they have started a new holding center that's partly buried underground, partly above ground, that can withstand almost anything, to keep our original seeds, ones that have not been genetically modified. Because they're so worried that genetically modified seeds are going to take over and then perhaps even cross-pollinate and destroy some of the original seeds, and then God knows what we have after that, that they're making sure they can protect at least the original seeds in Norway. Mm-hmm. So it's worse than you realize. And unfortunately, when you dive into a lot of these multinational corporate stories, it gets worse. It doesn't get better.
And I know, we gave you, a quick rundown of what's happening with Monsanto, and this is by no means new news. But that study with the tumors is important, right? Because this is the kind of stuff that our FDA should have been doing, not researchers in France. I'm happy researchers in France are doing it, but it's ridiculous the lack of oversight we have in our own country, especially when it comes to the food that we consume.
Now, think about all the stories we've told you on the Young Turks where politicians get influenced by the money that they take. Now, you think some of that influence isn't going to affect the FDA or other government agencies? It's affected almost every government agency. So you think that perhaps some things get authorized when they shouldn't be? Of course they do. So is this one of those cases? Well, we'll have to see over time, but this new research from France is not encouraging.
Hi, this is Mike Adams, the Health Ranger here with naturalnews.com, and one of the most common questions I'm asked by people is, what's the difference between natural and organic? Especially when you look at food labels at the grocery store, they see the word natural and they say, well, what does that really mean? Or now there's a lot of talk about organic. Dr. Oz sort of attacked organic not too long ago and called it the diet of snobs and elitists. And of course, there was a lot of backlash about that. But people are suddenly asking, well, what is organic really? What exactly is the difference between organic and non-organic, or organic and natural? So to answer those questions, here we go. Natural simply means, well, nothing. Yeah, natural is not regulated. It has no legal meaning, no technical meaning. In fact, anybody can say their product is natural regardless of where it comes from or how it's made. In fact, the food manufacturers insist that they can say anything that comes from planet Earth is natural. So they could say that, like, mercury cookies would be natural because they mine the mercury out of the earth, and the earth is natural, and therefore mercury cookies are natural. So they can say anything is natural, even some highly processed refined food laced with toxic artificial sweeteners, synthetic chemicals, GMOs. The biotech industry wants to say that GMOs are natural, and I'm not making that up, by the way. Most, well, hey, nearly all of the snack chips that claim to be all natural are genetically modified, made with GM corn. So there you go. Again, I'm not making this up. It sounds crazy to some people, but it's real. So natural means nothing in terms of regulatory meaning. Anybody can say natural. Now let's go to organic, because organic does mean something.
My friends, the information that you are about to witness from all of my years of research is the most important. It's been hidden in plain view the entire time. This is the ultimate secret, and it's about to be exposed. I have hundreds of government documents, textbooks, white papers, where for over 80 years, the elite of the Western world have talked about adulterating food and water to sicken and sterilize the population for the purpose of eugenics. It's all covered in the book Eco Science, written by the White House science czar John P. Holdren, where they talk about a planetary police state to carry out the forced sterilization. They also talk about covert systems in the water and food to sterilize the population. Now, this was written decades ago, before he was White House science czar. Now, suddenly, the stuff in this book is all over the news. They're selling it to the public as if it's a good thing. You see here before you what an average person would buy when they went shopping at the store. Not everything here is bad for you, but much of it has compounds and artificial chemicals that have been added that are extremely toxic and bad for your health, and they have known this the entire time, and they have approved them for use. Let's start with aspartame. You cannot go to the grocery store now and buy any type of even regular sugar gum that hasn't had aspartame added to it. In the 1970s, Searle tried to get it approved, and they couldn't. It took them 3 separate times because in their own studies with monkeys, large portions of them that were fed it died and contracted cancer. Now we have mainstream news articles, and the EU has done a major study finding lower birth weights, early birth, and yes, miscarriages from women that drink aspartame-laden soft drinks like Coke Zero. What is aspartame? It is the fecal matter of the E. coli bacteria. They took it and genetically engineered it. They can feed it toxic waste, and then it defecates aspartame. And it has so many bad health effects, it's just unspeakable. This is being done by design. It's also very, very addictive. But let's just go ahead and move away from aspartame and talk about McDonald's and chicken McNuggets. Now, I remember a decade ago or so reading health advisories claiming that a form of plastic that's used in silly putty, basically a type of silicone, was in the Chicken McNuggets, but also in many other TV dinners and other foods. It is illegal in every other nation in the world to add these chemicals to the food, but it's not in the United States. The big secret is all of this was done by design by the FDA. Look at all the drugs they've approved, and then it comes out later that they knowingly approve them when these drugs are causing heart attacks and cancer. In the Nuremberg trials, it came out that the Nazis were adding sodium fluoride to the water supply in the labor camps and death camps to make the population more docile and controllable. There had been hundreds of university studies before Hitler even came to power. This is a form of forced medication. They admit that 1 part per million of sodium fluoride more than doubles the chance of bone cancer in boys and men. As the public became educated in the last few decades, the government and industry's response was to not just put it in water, but to start adding it to thousands of products like children's water that's mixed with their formula or with their cereal. They started adding as much as 900 parts per million in things like powdered eggs. It causes reductions in IQ. It increases sterility or lack of fertility, and it's being added to so many of the daily staples that we consume. We'll get back to food additives in a moment. But first, I wanted to look at genetically modified organisms. Did you know for many years the American people have been eating cloned beef and pork, and now they're expanding out into other forms of meat? Let's look at salmon first. Major university studies conclusively have proven that the type of genetically modified salmon that is actually a cross species, they've mixed other animal genes in with it, that when this fish is introduced with wild natural salmon, within 40 generations, all of the natural salmon are extinct. And the FDA approved this, and they're going to allow it to be released into the wild. That isn't even a salmon, it is a cross species chimera. It is a mixture like something out of the island of Dr. Moreau, something out of a nightmare. More than 85% of the corn now consumed in the United States, and it's also starting to trend that way in Europe and Canada, is genetically engineered. It grows its own pesticide within the corn kernels so that insects won't eat it. If the insects can't eat this and live, what do you think is going to happen when lab rats or humans eat it? We have literally hundreds of studies showing that not just Monsanto's, but other major GMO companies' corn, that's the majority of corn we're now eating today in the United States, has been linked to organ failure in lab animals. The studies also show massive increases in sterility in rats and guinea pigs that are fed not just GMO corn, but GMO cotton seeds. Studies in India, Germany, and the United States have conclusively shown that when they feed the cotton seeds left over from the cotton crop from these genetically modified varieties, that the cows are having miscarriages, they are having low birth weights, or in many cases, they're simply dying. And what is in most processed foods? Genetically modified cottonseed oil. Major studies are also showing that genetically engineered crops are killing honeybees and monarch butterflies. But they don't stop there. Now they claim they're coming out with a genetically engineered mosquito that's malaria-proof that they're going to release into the open biosphere. The very genetic code of the planet is being butchered in a hostile corporate takeover. Many years ago, an executive from Monsanto was quoted in National Geographic as saying that that is their program, that they want to basically have their crops and their organisms take over the entire biosphere of this planet. And the major genetic engineer companies have focused mainly on 8 major food crops. Now they're expanding out into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of other plants, literally changing the genetic code of the planet. This is a genetic dictatorship. This is genetic vandalism. And that's why the Rockefellers, the United Nations, and others have built these giant armored seed vaults all over the world, not just at the Arctic Circle. And they admit they're doing it in case all of this gets out of hand, that they'll have a type of Noah's Ark So all these fake environmental groups, they never complain about this. They never talk about true environmental degradation. They want to put a tax on carbon dioxide that humans exhale, that plants respirate from and carry out photosynthesis with, as a way to shut down industrial society and control every facet of our lives. That's the big secret. This is a population reduction program. It is an epidemic. The sperm count has dropped in the Western world exponentially. Even the government has been predicting within another generation, almost everyone is going to be sterile. This is the globalist religion. This is their philosophy. They want the planet for themselves. The UN has said that their stated plan is an 80% population reduction. You've heard Ted Turner call us useless eaters and feeders and say that 80% of us need to be killed. You've heard Prince Philip say he wants to come back as a virus to kill the majority of the world population. Dr. Eric Pianka, Peter Singer, it's all over the news where they tell us that we should only have one child because more than one is bad for the environment and that the recession is good for lowering our carbon footprint. This is the big secret. We live in a scientific dictatorship, and the United States and England are the epicenter of this, and it's expanding worldwide. Remember all the secret testing, all the secret sterilization that went on in the United States and Europe. Remember what Hitler did. He learned all of that from the eugenicist and the Rockefeller family in the United States. This is a culture of death being pushed on you and your family. And even if you think the world is overpopulated, you need to understand that you're being targeted by this as well. Targeted by design. Recombinant bovine growth hormone in your milk, making 8-year-old girls go into puberty when they should be going into puberty at 12 or 13. Silicone in chicken McNuggets and hundreds of other processed foods. Aspartame, that is the feces of genetically engineered bacteria that has incredible health problems that have been proven. Think for yourself. It goes on and on. ABC News, this goes back 4 years ago. Viral meat spray, advancing food safety. They spray a live virus on the meat to supposedly kill the bacteria. This is a live vaccine they spray on most of the meat you're consuming that you're buying from the store. It gets even worse. The petroleum distillates, or toxic waste that's left over from petroleum refineries that refine oil into gasoline, they take these tens of millions of pounds of toxic waste that's left over, the fluoride, the mercury, the lead, and they dump it on crops as supposed fertilizer. And what do crops like tomatoes and corn and potatoes do? They pull in all of those toxins out of the ground. In fact, scientists for many years have used plants to actually detoxify areas that have been contaminated. And those plants are pulling all of this up, and then you are eating it. That's why the Washington Post reported in January of 2008 that a major study found that nearly a third of the 55 popular brand name foods and beverage products were filled with mercury. Despite the fact that the people of Europe for over 20 years have fought off all the genetically modified wheat and corn and other crops being planted in their nation, now the EU is buckled and is accepting it. The United States is literally a testing ground for all of this. It's just automatically approved. And the people that work for these corporations, they're compartmentalized. They don't know what's going on. The people that work at these stores, they have no idea what's happening. This is affecting all of us. This is hurting everyone. Many different forms of cancer are growing by thousands of percentage points. Diabetes, all these different diseases. And in major studies, it's all been linked to the toxic additives that are in our food, our water. And I haven't even had time to get into MSG. I mean, I've interviewed brain surgeons, neurologists, scientists. I mean, it just devastates the brain. It's an excitotoxin. It destroys the liver, and it is in tens of thousands of products. We can say no. We can stand up. But if you've got a neighbor giving fluoride water to their baby, please go over and warn them. If you got a neighbor that's sitting there eating MSG-filled chips, one after the other, warn them. You've got a responsibility. If you know people that are feeding processed foods filled with GMO, warn them. And for God's sakes, don't give it to your own children. If you want to kill yourself, that's your own business. But don't hurt your children. Don't do this, ladies and gentlemen.
Did Hitler get elected on Monday and start throwing people into ovens on Friday? No, it was a gradual process. The first thing that Hitler did was start to write newspaper articles. Everything that was going wrong was the Jews' fault. They're the ones that caused all these problems. Did the Jews write their own newspaper articles and go, I disagree? So then the Jews had to wear the Star of David so we can tell who you are. Did they say, no, that's a violation of my privacy. I don't have to tell you. No, the Jews decided, well, it's a religious symbol. We love God. We should be proud to wear the Star of David. Eventually, the Germans came in and they broke all of the windows in all of the Jewish businesses in one weekend. The Saturday night was known as Kristallnacht, which is German for Night of Glass. Did the Jews rise up and say, now, damn it, you're violating my property, you shouldn't do that? No. Gosh, we don't want to make the Germans any madder than they already are. Don't piss them off. They've got guns. Eventually, the Germans are loading them up into cattle trailers on the train. Where do you think you're going, on vacation? Where do you think they're going to take you? Well, now you're cold and naked and they're walking you into the ovens where you're going to go to mass execution. Is it time now to raise your hand and say, you know, I tend to disagree with all of this? Bang! You're dead. It's too late to complain. You should have complained at the beginning when you at least had a chance. How bad do things have to get before you do something? Do they have to take away all your property? Do they have to license every activity that you want to engage in? Do they have to be throwing you on cattle cars before you start to say, now wait a minute, I don't think this is a good idea? How long is it going to be before you finally resist?
feel as strongly as we do that the public needs to see this information, then make a commitment to get this film into the hands of as many people as possible. Share it through social media, post it on your website, send it to your friends via email, or pass it out on the street. You have permission to download this video and distribute it and display it in any non-commercial way.